Hello to our viewers, and welcome to this special conversation with our Metropolitan Lawrence Huculak. The reason for this conversation today, along with other things which we'll talk about in just a moment, is that this is the very day in 2006, February 11th, is when Metropolitan was installed as the Metropolitan Archbishop of Winnipeg for Ukrainian Catholics here and throughout Canada. And today we want to just talk to him a little bit about that event, the significance. That was 15 years ago. We also want to talk to him about some other dates and occasions that we are celebrating this month, last month, and certainly on the horizon in the not too distant future. Just to maybe give a little bit of idea of what we might be also touching upon today, I just want to read a few significant dates, not so much dates, but maybe periods in the life of Metropolitan Lawrence, and that is that 52 years ago he entered monastic life with the Basilian Fathers, the Order of St. Basil the Great. 44 years ago he was ordained a priest. 24 years ago a bishop, initially for the Eparchy of Edmonton, and of course, as I already mentioned, 15 years ago he was installed as our Metropolitan Archbishop here in Winnipeg. And so we'd like to talk with the Metropolitan a little bit about his life and about his experiences, and he is willing to share with us some insights and some experiences over these years. Just maybe to start near to the beginning, and that is maybe his priestly and monastic vocations to begin with. Of course, as I mentioned, he entered monastic life just over half a century ago. And also he was ordained some 44 years ago. And maybe if you could share a little bit with us, Metropolitan, your vocation. I guess it's one vocation, but maybe also in a sense two vocations, to monastic life and to the priestly ministry, and how these two maybe intertwine, and which one led to the other, and maybe just a little bit of that experience, please.
Certainly. Well, from my youngest years, I recall being influenced or impressed or having an interest in church life, in, we could say, priesthood, and even in religious life, monastic life. And how did that come about? Well, I was born and raised in Vernon, British Columbia. During those years, the Basilian Fathers were not there, but they had been pastors there previously. And my parents had worked with the Basilian Fathers previous to coming to Vernon, in Edmonton and in Vancouver. And so they kept that contact with them. And over these years, as I grew up in Vernon, we had contact with them. And I felt this desire that I would like to eventually join them in their community life. The road to that was a bit strange in that during my grade 11 year, my aunt, who was the Sister Servant of Mary Immaculate here in Winnipeg, Sister Catherine, she began to write to me together with the young Frank Sidiak, who is now the Redemptorist Father, Father Frank Sidiak. He was a seminarian then, and they both were encouraging me that I should consider taking my grade 12 in Roblin, Manitoba, at St. Vladimir's College, which was run by the Redemptorists. So I did that, and it was a very important year in my formation. I learned a lot about church life. And although the outcome was that I didn't join the Redemptorists, I went home and applied to join the Basilians. And this I did. They sent me then to Ottawa, where I was there for 2 years as a candidate. And then when it began time to do the formal training of the novitiate, the Basilians sent me to Long Island, where the American province had the novitiate. And I studied there 1 year, returned to Canada. And even then I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a lay brother, that is a non-ordained member of the community, or a priest. But the Basilians told me, well, just go through the studies and decide when the time comes. So I continued with studies for the priesthood. I did my philosophy studies in Ottawa, at the University of Ottawa. And then the big traumatic shock in my life, they said, for theology, we want you to go to Rome. And so I went to Rome. Initially, I really didn't want to go to Rome, but after I got the hang of it, and I stayed there for 11 and a half years, and it was during that time in Rome that I came back to Canada to be ordained priest. Also during Rome, I took my solemn profession of vows, the final vows as a Basilian, and continued my studies. And then after many years there, I returned to Canada and began work as a parish priest in Mundare, Alberta, where I was until the point that I was appointed bishop.
Okay. The head of our church, His Beatitude Sviatoslav, wrote you a very extraordinary letter on the occasion of your 70th birthday, which we just celebrated on March 25th.
January 20th.
I'm sorry, January 25th, sorry. Thinking of Blaviščina. January 25th. And if you see this letter, maybe I'll put a little plug, archeparchy.ca, that's the archeparchial website. You'll find the original letter and the English translation as well. It's quite an extraordinary recognition of Metropolitan's years of service. And he mentions there, he talks about your love for the consecrated life, for monastic life, religious life, and your promotion of this life here in Canada. I'm just wondering if you want to maybe share something about that, and maybe would you recommend this life to others, and if so, what would be your advice to someone who might be considering, as you did many years ago, the possibility of religious life, monastic life?
Well, basically, once I entered the religious monastic life, I stayed in it until the point when I was appointed bishop. So when I was appointed bishop for the Edmonton Eparchy, that was the point when I knew I had to leave community life. I was no longer going to live in a monastic community. So I'd mentioned that the years in Ottawa where I studied, that was again in the community life there. And then the 11 and a half years that was in Rome, that was always in a large Basilian community. And when I was there, I eventually became the prefect of students. I had a lot of responsibility with the students. I directed the Basilian Students Choir, which sang often on the Vatican radio. And so I was involved a lot with the student activity. When I came back to Canada, they sent me to Mundare, which was the novitiate home for the Basilians. So again, I was involved in the formation program for the order, as well as being a parish priest of Mundare. So my life always was involved with the student formation. At the same time, I was asked to begin to give parish missions and religious retreats. And these retreats were often to the religious sisters, the sister servants of Mary Immaculate, for example. And this kept me in contact again with the religious communities. So I've always highly praised and appreciated the work of the religious communities. And I can only encourage those young people and even not so young people who feel a call, vocation to religious life, to investigate that and to start conversations with religious communities, and that to see in fact if that's where God is calling you.
Thank you very much. And just maybe on that same theme, as you said, when you were chosen to serve as a bishop, you sort of, in a sense, shifted from community life, from monastic life. How about your life as a priest? Also, when you became a bishop, obviously, people maybe have some impression of what the life of a bishop is all about. It certainly is pastoral ministry, but on the other hand, maybe sometimes they think, well, but the priest was sort of in the parish life. Have you had experiences, or how has your experience with sort of maybe direct, maybe pastoral connection, and even parish work for that matter, since you're being ordained a bishop?
Yes, once you become a bishop, it's certainly quite a difference. There is a change from being a parish priest. You still have pastoral care over a given portion of the people of God, but the parish priest on a day-to-day basis is involved with the life of his parishioners, from baptisms, weddings, church meetings, Sunday liturgies on a regular basis generally, funerals, visiting the sick. There's a certain specific nature and requirements of a parish priest. Once you become bishop, it takes a change. You're responsible for the people of God, but also for the priests who are doing that and carrying that out. And so in a certain sense, at times the danger is of the bishop that he falls away, he moves up, as they often said, higher. And it's interesting, the picture that's over your head there. One of my cousins took that picture when I was installed here in Winnipeg, and he put the words, I think, of his Beatitude, who was here for the installation, and he said, the higher you go up, meaning in church authority, the farther you see, or the better you see. And it's an interesting aspect. When you're the parish priest, you see very close around you. When you become bishop, you have to take in a wider scope, a wider vision of not just one parish, but all of the parishes. Not just one parish priest, but all of the priests assigned to you. And then your neighboring bishops, your neighboring eparchies and dioceses. The bishop is called to be open and in dialogue with the world that is out there and the church that is out there, be it within the Ukrainian Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, Christian churches, and in other faith-believing communities as well. So there's a change certainly in the dimension, but it is still part of that ministry, that mission to serve the people of God, serving it in a different aspect, a different dimension.
Okay. Let's move to today's anniversary, the 15th anniversary of your shepherding, your pastoral ministry here as the Metropolitan Archbishop of Winnipeg. So you were first called to serve as a bishop in 1996. That was for the Eparchy of Edmonton. And I'm just wondering, maybe a little bit just to begin there, what were the circumstances, and how would you characterize that 10-year service there in Edmonton? What might have been the highlights, maybe a little bit of that period?
Well, like every first assignment, that's where you cut your teeth, you might say. That's where I really learned to be a bishop. And a priest, before he's ordained a priest, he goes through seminary formation, which trains him very specifically in how to be a priest. But there isn't really a formation period as such for bishops. In fact, it's based on how you've lived out your life, especially as a priest, and if those who are making that decision, starting from your fellow bishops of the day, say this person we feel is capable to move upward and to become a bishop, then it's based on what you've done before. So when I came into the chancery in Edmonton, I had known the chancery because I came and visited from time to time, but I was totally, I don't want to say clueless, but many things were a mystery to me, and I had to ask the staff and that questions, and there was very good staff there who helped me along to learn the ropes and learn how to do it, both the administrative work within the chancery, and then this new mission of going out for pastoral visits to the parishes as a bishop, and how you conduct the liturgy, the pontifical liturgy, which of course is different than the regular priestly liturgy, let's say of the Sunday morning nature, and you learn all of that. In the years that I was in Edmonton, there were a couple of very important events that I remember well, and that was in the year 2000. That was the year that we were entering that new era. And the whole question, what would happen? Would the world survive? Would airplanes fall out of the air? What would happen? The Christian community saw this as an important time to consider our expressions of our faith. And as it happened in Edmonton, like in other communities, every year during January, there is the Week of Prayer of Christian Unity. And one particular church hosts a prayer event to which other Christian churches are invited to come and participate in. Now, often they're not overly well attended. It's in the coldest month of the year, often in the evening, and in Edmonton, we struggled with that. When it came to the year 2000, it fell upon the Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of Edmonton to host this, and everybody looked at us and said, well, this is the year 2000, you've got to do something spectacular, something great. And we had a very good committee there, and we prepared well a service, which is kind of presented by the Christian churches throughout the world. And we used that, and we held the celebration in St. Basil's Ukrainian Catholic Church in Edmonton, which is a very large church. It can seat over 1,000 people. And we were flabbergasted that we had a full church for that event. We had all of these leaders of the faith communities, and for the first time ever, the Ukrainian Orthodox always participated, but for the first time ever, the Archbishop of the Russian Orthodox Church also came and participated, and we had this very wonderful big service. And then we went, often there's coffee and donuts type thing. Our people said, no, we're Ukrainians, we got to do a good dinner. And so they put on a meal after at St. Basil's Parish Center there, a beautiful area for that. And that was certainly a very successful event for the year 2000, and that I remember well. Another event that was important was in the year 2002, we marked the 100th anniversary of the arrival in Canada, and they came to what is now Alberta, of the first permanent Ukrainian Catholic clergy to Canada. And that was in the form of the first Basilian Fathers, together with the Sister Servants of Mary Immaculate, who came to the present day Alberta to begin ministering to the Ukrainian Catholic faithful. And so we designed a number of special events to mark this, and one of them was the consecration of the altar at St. Joseph Cathedral in Edmonton, which actually had not been consecrated with relics to that point. And so we invited all the other Ukrainian Catholic bishops of Canada to attend that, and had a big ceremony for that, as well as a big banquet, I remember. That was attended by the Lieutenant Governor, Lois Hole, a very popular Lieutenant Governor in Alberta. So we had a number of such events that marked this big anniversary. So those are certainly some of the memories that I have from my days in the Eparchy of Edmonton.
No, okay. And after you see maybe cut your teeth, or you had the experiences there, you were chosen to be the Metropolitan of Winnipeg. You want to maybe share a little bit about that? What were the circumstances? Maybe how was it that you were selected or named or appointed Metropolitan, and maybe also a little bit about the actual event itself, the installation, and the first impressions, even for that matter.
Well, in the process of becoming a bishop, for example, priests do not apply for the position. It's not like a secular job where applications are now being received to be bishop of such and such a place. The process is very discreet. There's no campaigning. And so that's when one goes from a priest to becoming a bishop. When you are a bishop, you become involved in the process, because as a bishop, you have a voice in these matters. And so I was aware as a bishop in Canada that I was one of the candidates considered for the position. You always work, when you are choosing someone to become a bishop, for what's called a terna, a group of 3 names, 3 possible candidates for the position. And this moves along. So we decide that first on the local level within Canada. That is then taken to the Synod of the Ukrainian Catholic Bishops in Ukraine. They have their say, they have their voice in that matter, and then they give the results of their opinions to the Holy See, to the Vatican, and then the Holy Father is the final one who makes the decision, especially for those positions outside of Ukraine. And so I get a notification. The nuncio calls me from Ottawa to tell me this. And I realized then in January of 2006 that I'm to be transferred to Manitoba. And by canon law, if you're already a bishop, you have 2 months in which to carry out that move. When you become a bishop and you are a priest, you have 3 months to tidy up your affairs and to prepare for the ordination. When in this case I was to come to Winnipeg, you're not ordained to become Metropolitan, you're installed. It's a liturgical ceremony within the Divine Liturgy, and it has perhaps less requirements than becoming a bishop. But I needed to end up certain matters in the Eparchy of Edmonton, prepare to come here and to take over this new position as the Metropolitan here in Manitoba. I knew Manitoba somewhat, but yet on the other hand, I had never served here really in this archeparchy. It has strong similarities to Alberta and Saskatchewan, the three prairie provinces as regards Ukrainian Catholic churches. There's a strong similarity, but I still had to get to know the parishes, the people, the faithful, the clergy, and they had to get to know me. And that was one of the differences. Although I had been a bishop already for 9 years and a priest for how many other years, yet when I came here, I still felt at times that they looked upon me as someone new, someone who had just been ordained, and he's coming together, and they says, "We'll show you how it's done. We'll guide you along in these matters," you know. And that's, you know, to be expected. And so that took time to get used to that. The layout of the church in Manitoba is different than Alberta. In Alberta, a lot of the parishes are within a one-day driving range from Edmonton. So that means I could drive out in the morning, have the service, and come back. Whereas in Manitoba, Winnipeg being in the southern part of the province, it meant that those parishes, for example, in the Dauphin area, and the higher up in the Interlake area, certainly the Paw Thompson, that all those areas, the Brandon, Rossburn area, it took much more time to go out there. So there was a different geographical setting for it. So it has taken time to learn that, to get a feel, and to, I guess the best word I can say is to feel the pulse of the church in Manitoba. That's not something you do immediately. It takes time. And so those were some of the challenges I had in coming here to Manitoba.
Would you care to I don't know, maybe share your thoughts, or maybe put your finger on after you've done that, the installation, as well as getting a feel for the archeparchy? Is there any well, I guess maybe I'm not asking for details, but otherwise anything that maybe surprised you somewhat, or was unexpected to you, moving, let's say, from Edmonton to Manitoba, besides the things you mentioned just now, and what you might have seen as maybe, okay, these are the kind of your goals or the challenges in a positive way of the things that you would want to attend to in the church here in Manitoba, or the archeparchy.
One thing that was different was not directly from the church's point of view, but the economics of the province. Alberta was still in its boom time, and there was a lot of jobs. The oil industry and all of that was very strong. And I came to Manitoba and I could feel that that was not quite the case. I used to joke that I came one way as I drove, let's say, to Manitoba. All the other cars were going westward to Alberta, you know. So economically, the provinces was not identical, Alberta to Manitoba. And this affects the lives of the people and the faithful in how they are managing. Issues that were difficult here, there were many more parishes. At the time in Edmonton, when I was there, there was, I think, 80-some parishes throughout the province, mostly in that northern half of the province. Manitoba, I saw in the books, at its highest point had 144 churches throughout the province, many of them in rural areas. And by the time I'm coming along, there's a decline that is happening, that especially the people are moving off the farms into the cities. You don't need such large populations to run the farms. And so these rural churches are beginning to have difficulty holding on to their faithful, and especially the young people are leaving the area. And so they are struggling in keeping themselves viable. And the whole question, well, what happens here? And this is we knew in a sense how to build up parishes, but there wasn't very much preparation in how to close down churches. That's not something that's not a matter that people want to really get into. So this was something that I had to take into account here. It was going on in Alberta, but probably not as strong as here due to the numbers. In the years that I was here, I also saw the decline in the amount of clergy. The clergy were generally older than those in Alberta. And over the years, we've buried many of them, also together with the bishops. Many of them are resting here at our cemeteries here. So there was certainly all of this change of dynamics that is going on in the province. And these are things that I have to understand and to discern what is God's call to us as a church in the province of Manitoba in this archeparchy. There was a different relationship, an interesting one here, in the fact that in Winnipeg, there are, as for many years, 3 Catholic archbishops. The oldest diocese was the Diocese of St. Boniface, with the archbishop that is there. The Archdiocese of Winnipeg, which is often considered the English archdiocese, and then the Ukrainian Catholic archeparchy, with the archbishop, and also the Ukrainian Orthodox Metropolitan also resides here. It's been very good working here, that I've got good relations with all of the Roman Catholics and the Ukrainian Orthodox Metropolitans, and I think we have a good working arrangements where we come together, we share ideas, we hear how others are doing in that. So that is quite a favorable relationship that is here. So that's sort of some of the issues that I've seen here at this time.
Okay. I wanted to touch upon a little bit of the future, maybe your thoughts on that. But you know what? I think maybe we could sort of maybe put it together with another anniversary which is coming up, and that is in November, the 65th anniversary of the Metropolitan See itself of Winnipeg. Established November 3rd in 1956. And in his pastoral letter that the Synod of Bishops issued in 2019, they talked about the different issues, and they spoke about the patriarchate of the Ukrainian Catholic Church as being the crown of development and maturity of a particular Eastern Church in her patriarchal structure and dignity. And our patriarchate is thus built on a foundation of development and assured strengthening of the internal unity of our church at all levels. I'm just wondering if the same spirit maybe might have also inspired the establishment of the Metropolitan province, and maybe if you wanted to maybe share your thoughts on how the Metropolitan, or I guess maybe in a sense why it was established, and what it has meant for Canada, having a Metropolitan in Winnipeg. Of course, you're not the first Metropolitan. There were 2 before you, and there was actually 4 bishops before you, beginning with Blessed Bishop and Martyr Nikita Budka, and of course Bishop Basil Ladika, and of course Metropolitan Maxim Hermenuk, who served for a very long time as bishop, and the first Metropolitan, established at the time Metropolitan Michael Bisdell, and yourself. And maybe some of your thoughts again on what the significance of this anniversary, and what we might take to heart, what is significance for us as faithful, not only in the Archeparchy, but obviously throughout Canada as well.
The creation of the Metropolitan See in 1956 was important in 2 ways. One was within Canada, that it gave a structure, a canonical or church structure, for the Ukrainian Catholic faithful who were scattered across Canada, as we like to say, from sea to sea to sea, although I don't know if there were too many up in the Arctic Sea. But it was a sign, and I often think of my predecessor, Bishop Ladika, how one Ladika, and before him Bishop Budka, how one bishop had to travel across all of Canada, from Sydney, Nova Scotia, which was our parish farthest to the east in Canada, to Vancouver and Vancouver Island, with our parishes to the farthest west, and how they traveled across Canada to visit all of these parishes. As more and more Ukrainians immigrated to Canada, more parishes were developed, and so they saw the need within the church organization and structure to create more eparchies, and then they were not to be independent eparchies, but they're joined together under this, what's called a Metropolitan See, an ecclesiastical province. And this was the scope of that, to help unify and coordinate the faith lives and structural lives, administrative lives of Ukrainian Catholics across Canada. So this indeed was a very important event for Ukrainian Catholics in Canada, but also was a very important event because this was the first time in the history of the Ukrainian Catholic Church coming from Ukraine that a metropolitan province was created outside of Ukraine. Winnipeg was first for Canada, soon after followed by Philadelphia for the United States, and then some years later, eventually, a metropolitan province was created in Poland for Ukrainian Catholic faithful there and in Brazil. And then at the same time, and this happened when the church in Ukraine was in the underground. It was persecuted. It had no voice. And so this is where the Ukrainian Catholics in Canada and the United States, Western Europe, South America, they felt that they had to be the voice for the Ukrainian Catholic people and church that was suffering in Ukraine and that was living in the new lands of immigration. So the structure was of great assistance in this matter. And I think it gave encouragement to the people in Ukraine who would find this out, that our church was strong in the immigration and it was surviving and it was able to help them. And in fact, when Ukraine opened up in the 1990s, a lot of help, personnel-wise, financial-wise, and other organizational-wise, came from, let's say, North America, Western Europe, South America, back to Ukraine and helped them. And so we've seen, thank God, the resurgence of the Ukrainian Catholic Church in Ukraine, that it too now has resurrected, it has grown, developed itself into the effect that they have created new bishops, new eparchies, new metropolia, metropolitan sees, as we have here. And we see that the culmination of that growth is the creation or recognition of the patriarchal status for our church. And this is something that we have all been working towards and continue to want to see to come about. And in fact, we've laid the structure for this canonically by the creation, as canon law calls for the structure, a central location, the main cathedral now that's in Kiev, the different departments of our church, the patriarchal, using already the term according to canon law, patriarchal catechetical commission, commission for immigration, commission for religious life, for many areas. And so this is constantly in the form of development. In Canada, we recognize at the same time that we are not identical totally to our faithful in Ukraine, although we have very strong ties, and we have to continue to work out our formation and our direction here in Canada with the situation that we find ourselves, and even now, especially in these days, where there's a certain amount of downsizing and restructuration that's going to be important for us. And that's something that I see as very important to us, especially now with the new element of this COVID-19 virus. We don't know yet the total effect the pandemic will have on the life of the Ukrainian Catholic Church and all Christian churches and faith groups in Canada. We can only have hope that we will come through this and be able to learn from it and continue to grow as a church and in our love for Jesus Christ.
Okay, I think that's you covered some of the last question, or the second last question I wanted to ask about the future of this metropolitan province in Canada as well. I know in the past, and of course, there's the Metropolitan Archbishop, and there are other maybe suffragan sees to a certain extent. I'm not sure how much that is kind of underlined in your relationship with the other bishops and the other archeparchs. I think we see a lot of obviously very good collaboration and for on the level of catechesis and other questions in the church in Manitoba. I'm just wondering maybe No, you spoke about restructuring, and certainly that is downsizing or kind of reconfiguring. Just again, even our parishes, etc., where the populations are, and how do we serve them with what we have and what we need to have. Just maybe if you want to just maybe a few words on the future of the Metropolitan, maybe in the next, I don't know, 30, 40 years, and maybe in that same context, what would be the role or the goals of the Archdiocese of Winnipeg in that whole kind of vision, if you will, of what we need to do, not only to survive, holding on by our fingertips, but thriving as a church as we need to do as well.
I think the first goal that we have to look forward to is to continue to keep alive the faith of our people, of our faithful, and to provide them with ongoing formation, that is, with formation, understanding of their faith lives, their prayer lives, the role of the Holy Trinity in their life, that they are filled with the Holy Spirit, that they understand their baptismal commitments in today's day and age. We cannot be caught up in past history, and this always is a bit of the danger when we recall historical events and anniversaries and birthdays, that we think about the past, but we have to not get caught up in that, but think towards the future. So the first one I can see is this need to continue to support and help the faithful, and that means the laity, the religious sisters, the clergy, and even the bishops in their faith lives, and how they can be strong in them and continue to journey down this road that often is rather dark or unclear what the future direction is. I would call that goal number one. Goal number two is to concretely, as we've mentioned already, consider how do we restructure our community, our church groups into viable parish organizations. It's clear that we cannot continue to maintain small little churches all around the countryside and yet have no clergy to go and serve them. And even if there are small little churches, what kind of a faith life, catechetical process, good works do they carry out? We can ask a lot of questions. What kind of a life do they live as small parishes? Rather, in today's day and age, with communications, and we're seeing that now with live streaming and YouTubes and everything else, of using the abilities that we have to concentrate ourselves into strong parish communities throughout the province. So this is another goal we have to look forward to. And third goal, I would say, is the need to encourage young men to enter the priesthood, to serve the ministry of these people. I think in past years at times the priesthood was much more attractive. People looked upon it a bit like hero worship maybe, and today it's less seen as a less challenge. It's not so attractive, and yet it has a very fundamental role of bringing Christ to the people, and we need that in order to serve our faithful throughout the province. The last goal I could see that I feel we need is a very concrete one, and that is I would like to work on creating what I would call the Archeparchy Heritage Center. And that means having a physical location in which to coordinate and develop the patrimony that is coming down to us and that we see concretely in our archives, the archival material that is centered here in the chancery. And this comes, a lot of it comes from the parishes. To coordinate the preserving of artifacts, museum artifacts. This too is part of our patrimony. Our book or library collection, and this is books that are specific to the history of the Ukrainian Catholic Church in Manitoba, to the lives of the faithful as they lived them out, And that also includes the music, the church music history, which is very important, both in the printed music books, pages, the collection of record albums and recordings of church choirs and groups, even folk groups or groups that went caroling and things like that, to preserve all of that. And also part of this Archeparchy Heritage Center is a place to work out what to do with church surplus items. When churches are being closed, you don't just give away the elements that were, the items that were in the churches. You don't put them out in a garage sale or put them into recycle, but there's a way to either dispose of them or to share them with others. This requires coordination, and so I see a need for this to be developed, because right now we're trying to do a lot of this within the space of this Chancery building, and it's like the Rubik's Cube. We can't get it all into one location. And I see this as an area of concern, and that we need to look at in the immediate years that are ahead of us.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You know what? We're almost coming to a conclusion of our little interview, but I want to maybe add on one bonus question for our viewers as well. I'm sure they'll be interested. I want to refer again to this letter from His Beatitude Sviatoslav on the occasion of your 70th birthday. And I quote, he writes, "Distinct recognition is due for your academic activity that has been crowned with numerous successes. You have always been a zealous researcher of the liturgical patrimony of our church." Like not a few bishops, you have an academic background, and you've accomplished, made various accomplishments in studies, and you successfully defended your doctorate in liturgical studies at the Pontifical Oriental Institute. And after that, of course, various articles as well as studies which maybe not be that public or published for the Synod of Bishops and for the Conference of Bishops and other groups. I'm just wondering what if you had a bit more time to spend back in the libraries and the archives, and maybe just finishing or going forward in some of your studies, what would you want to explore further in the field of I don't know, academia, or maybe some other writings or articles or papers you'd like to work on?
One very specific area is, perhaps we can call it an extension of my doctoral thesis. My doctoral thesis was on the liturgy of John Chrysostom in the Kievan Metropolitan, the Ukrainian church in Ukraine, up until the early 1800s. When I was doing that research, and that was basically in Rome, one of the areas that I looked at was the publication of the liturgical books, the Služebnike, that priests use and the faithful use. And another area was the books that the bishop uses when he celebrates those special pontifical bishops' liturgies. And the aspects of those liturgies, and many people know that when the bishop comes to town, in fact, it often causes fear and trembling among choir directors and altar servers, because there's all these different parts and we don't know how to handle it. I've always been interested in that aspect, and so having been a bishop now for a good number of years, and having encountered a variety of the liturgical texts themselves, this is something I want to elaborate on. So for example, I've even seen a copy of the little brochure of the Episcopal ordination of Nikita Budka. So when he was ordained a bishop in 1911 or 12, my memory's going already.
1912.
Yeah. So just to see what was written there, how that was done, compared to the current official texts for the bishop's functions. For many people, they say, well, what's the difference? What does it mean? But historically, it is a very interesting field. And I say, having now had to actually celebrate the Episcopal liturgies, and seeing these differences, and having the direct line of celebration as was done in Canada by my predecessors, Bishop Neil Savarin, even Nikita Budka, Metropolitan Hermanyuk, and now the ones that are done in Ukraine, there's a difference going on there, and that is an area that certainly I've collected material because I have that at hand, and when I'm given the time, I shall jump into that area to continue that research.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
That, and I also have to clean my bedroom out.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I think this will be very enlightening for all of our viewers. And again, maybe on behalf of our viewers and the Archeparchy, although we've expressed this, certainly God's blessings and congratulations on your anniversary, the 70th anniversary of your life upon this earth, as well as 15 years serving as our pastor here in the Archeparchy of Winnipeg. And we look forward to, again, some kind of I'm sure there'll be a celebration of some kind, a commemoration of the 65th anniversary of the Metropolitan, and future celebrations. Maybe, one of the highlights Metropolitan mentioned in 2012, he hosted all the bishops of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, as I'm sure many of our viewers will remember, here in Winnipeg, and it was a very special time for the whole, not only for the Archeparchy, for the whole province. I think everyone was very excited about the Synod of Bishops. And maybe when we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Metropolitan, maybe we'll have all the bishops back here again, God willing, if the pandemic changes and we're able to do so. But thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And we know that we're in your prayers, and you bless us as well, and God bless you with many more successes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.